everyone. Welcome to episode 421 of This is Whole Life. You already know that we get together every week and dig a little bit deeper into what we're talking about here at Whole Life Church in Orlando. And we're just lucky that we get to talk about a lot of cool things because, like Ken said this morning, we have the coolest people.
Bar none.
Life. Bar none. It's not even a question.
No.
We're not going to debate that because there's no point in it. And once you meet the people to my left and to my right, you will concur that we do have the coolest people here. So who wants to...
Or just go look in the mirror and you'll know that we have the coolest people.
Oh,
that was so nice.
Look at that.
You see, that's why Ken's lead pastor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the kind of...
Public relations degree. Public relations degree.
Oh, man.
It's paying for itself.
See, Mom, I told you. So, Melanie, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, absolutely. So to my left, I have Kerri Brown and her husband across from her, Sanjay Brown. And for those who haven't tuned in yet, they were the ones that team preached this morning. And
team preaching.
I think that's the first time that in, I don't know, at least since I've been here with Voices of Whole Life, that we've had a team preaching Voices of Whole Life.
yeah.
Well, thank you for making us first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Thanks for being willing.
We wanted to make sure the bar was high for everybody else that would come after you. So
Oh, boy.
That's true. I'm thinking back even before you got here. I don't think we've ever had a tandem before
during Voices of Whole Life.
during the Voice of Whole Life. I don't think we used to call it. Did we always? I think we called it something different way back, and then maybe. Tammy, if you're listening, send us a note so we can clear that up and make sure. Because I know if there's anyone that knows.
Well, Andy listens too.
Yeah, maybe. Does he? I don't know. Andy, if you're listening, please send me a voicemail or an email.
This is one way to find out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
If you don't say anything, Andy, we're going to know.
That's it. We're going to know. And,
When the roll is called up yonder.
and if you really care about Andy, if you want to send him a nudge, if you happen to have his number or email.
Don't do that. We want to know the truth. We want to know the truth. Don't do it.
Sorry, Andy. Ken wouldn't let me.
You have to wait for 2 weeks before you can say anything to Andy. Then we'll know.
Then we'll know. If it's after 2 weeks, it's disqualified. Oh, man. Well, you know who does listen?
Tell me.
Mel.
Mel.
Yeah, Mel listens. And
Mel does listen.
And he has emailed us before, and this might be one of my favorite emails that I've ever gotten here at the podcast. So here we go.
All right.
Randy, I'm surprised you were not familiar with Job's most famous friend, who is the shortest man in the Bible, Bildad, the Shuhite. Well played, sir. Well played. It's still funny, and I've read that I don't know how many times since he sent it to me early. Of course, this is referring to last week's episode, which, if you haven't already taken part in listening to that episode, go back, swipe down one more episode from here, and you'll catch it. And it was Omari Gregory, a really, really cool message. And we talked a lot about Job. We talked a lot about Job through the whole, like everyone. Did we talk about Job today? I don't think so.
No.
Job didn't.
But I feel like we could bring him in.
We could, yeah.
Could we?
We could.
Okay, before the episode's over, guys, let's make sure we get Job in here somehow, because then I feel like every message dabbled somehow, and even if we just had to bring it into the podcast, I'm okay with that.
Well, I'll go ahead and give Christina a heads up.
Oh, that's right. We do have one.
I feel like she can work that into your story. What is that? Was the
Embracing your story.
embracing your story?
Yeah,
Job
no.
had to do that, yeah.
Yeah, and he must have had to have some forgiveness somewhere, right?
Absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't think we can have this story without forgiveness. So when you guys were asked to do this, was the initial goal or the initial thought like, hey, let's do this together? Or because I don't know. Or like, did you get a call on your phone and be like, oh, you're looking for the wrong person. You want my wife, or vice versa. It's like Omari last week was like, are you sure you're not looking for my mom? So how did this come about?
He approached both of us, actually. He sent a group text to both of us asking if we would be willing to do it. So he asked us both at the same time to do it together. I think that was the intention.
I know them both, and I thought this would be really fun to hear. And Mel and I were talking about it, and we thought it would be really fun to have a husband and wife do a sermon. And and then we thought of Kerri and Sanjay and knew it was going to be awesome.
Well, you had everyone right away. I wasn't here for first service. I was busy this morning, even though I was tuned in while I was doing something else.
You don't
second
have to
service.
make excuses for yourself, Randy. It's okay.
Yeah, no, I feel for the online family, I really feel like if I'm not here in the chat hanging out and that I'm missing them. I don't know if they're for sure missing me. I think so, but I'm definitely missing them. But in second service, Haas was like, man, I am loving this chair thing, this feel that we have.
That was a great feel.
And he's like, I feel like I'm at home right now.
Yeah.
And he's sitting in the front row chatting with everybody in the online worship. So I think the vibe was very mellow and just very, hey, we're hanging out and we're going to learn something together. So then when they asked you, did they give you something to preach on? Or was it, what do you want to preach on?
I think I asked Ken if there was a topic, and he, whatever comes to mind. So throughout our planning, multiple themes came up.
Job wasn't one of them, though.
No.
I don't know.
Job
I don't
wasn't
remember
one of
the
them.
early ones. I know lots of stories came up. We looked at other Bible stories. We looked at Nelson Mandela's story. We were trying to figure out what was the cross section, what stories would work and what stories wouldn't.
Nelson
wouldn't
Mandela,
work.
that would have been interesting.
That would have been an interesting one. We chose to nix that one. I'm not sure why, but he's one of my favorite human beings.
Yeah.
So he came to mind, but we eventually settled on where we settled.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories that we can tell to, illustrate this point, but we knew we had to narrow it down, and we really wanted to emphasize kind of the complexities in the stories that we told today to illustrate, that forgiveness is not a simple or easy thing to do.
We could sit here all day on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, sit here all day.
And I'm looking at, if you look at these, all of the last three, I think there's three here. 2, 3.
Wow.
Basically 3 pages of questions and comments that we'll get to and work through, because I feel like everyone has felt this in their life or not known for sure how to deal with it. And it's really, I don't think we often miss the importance of how much of a role it plays in our lives. And even when you think, it's like, well, I know what forgiveness is. We've all, like, from the time we were how high, you tell your brother you're sorry, you ask for forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. And, your parents trying to teach you the right and the wrong of making things right with people. And it wasn't until I was probably, 30, early 30s. And we were producing a TV show. And one of our guests was Dick Tibbetts. Dr. Dick Tibbetts, who had written a book called Forgive to Live. And he was on the show, and there was 2 of us, a main host, and I was co-hosting that day. And I was just sitting there, and someone said in my ear, you're scowling. We need you to smile on set, because it was a TV, I was on camera. And after looking at it, I can totally remember what I was thinking. There was a person who I thought, well, they said that, they were sorry, and I didn't say I forgave them. And I was like, maybe I could kind of replaying that. And it was really a sour look. I was zoned, so I wasn't really paying attention, but it made me realize what a negative effect it has that you might not feel it. It's there, it's down deep inside, and your face is totally reflecting it. And then he said something after they said that, what brought me out of it was, forgiveness isn't for you. He's like, it's not for you. It's not for them.
Yeah.
But if you don't forgive and say, okay, this is it. But now also we have boundaries. Doesn't mean that you have to be friends with the person. Right. And even if that person's close, it may be a long time before you become anything more than you can be. And he's like, and even if that's not safe, being just sociable, it's like, hey, we need to keep ourselves separated. That really changed how happy I was as a person, because it wasn't just one. I mean, I think we all probably have more than one that we've had in that. So how do you explain this? And I think you guys touched on it in a multitude of different ways during your message, but for someone who maybe hasn't gotten that part yet, like, this is to make sure that you are well, that you and God have this figured out. And then, how do you deal with this when it can be a little crazy, a little dicey sometimes, depending on who that other person is?
I will let you go, honey.
Okay. Well, I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings about what forgiveness actually is, right? And what it's not. So I think understanding what it is can help facilitate that process. So forgiveness is not forgetting, right? It's not excusing the behavior, someone's behavior. It's not ignoring the behavior. It's not, when we have a confusion about what forgiveness actually is, it interrupts the process of being able to actually do the work of forgiving. It's not a feeling, right? So I think there's certain misunderstandings and misbeliefs that we have about what it is, which,
But why do we believe it's a feeling? Is it because the feelings are so strong that we just...
There's an emotional connection to
we
the
just
heart,
tie
the
it to
hurt,
that?
I would imagine. Whatever was done wrong, there's always an emotional connection to it. So that's going to be embedded in our bodies, and we carry that stress with us, right? Whatever the hurt is or the harm that was done, we carry that with us. And sometimes it's hard to let that go. Sometimes we hold on to the anger because it serves a purpose also. We have a reason to justify the emotions and the feelings that we have. And you may even have some folks that are comfortable with the anger, having that feeling, having that edge. That's also a possibility. But I think more the emotional part of it, that connection. There's real hurt that was there. The feeling that I had within that moment is going to be there. If it's a physical thing, then the physical pain is there. Scars may still be there. So that's hard to let go. Or it could have been a financial damage that was done.
Sure.
And I'm still grappling with the after effects of that. And that also adds to the emotional connection that we have with it also.
So if the feeling doesn't necessarily indicate that you have forgiven someone, what is the indicator that you've forgiven someone?
Good question. I would say a good indicator can be when we reflect on whatever it was that we experienced, the hurt, what comes up for us. Like, are we harboring resentment, bitterness? Like, what is the experience, the emotional experience we're having when we think of what was done to us, what harm was done to us? And what does the recovery process look like in terms of the impact and whatever has happened post the incident? What does that process look like? But it's really about connecting with what you're feeling when you reflect on or have an encounter with the person, if you're still having, interactions with that person, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I had one experience in life or I've had many, but there's one particularly that kind of comes to mind where somebody that I really felt had wronged my wife, and when I would see them in public places, I'd just feel rage and just a deep wanting to grab a hold of them and say things. And I remember after maybe a year and a half of really praying about God, just Lord, let me figure out how to let this go, because I couldn't really, I think the most popular question is, well, how do you let it go? And for me, I've never come up with a real process. There's things, but it's like, I don't think there's like a magical step 1, step 2, step 3, you automatically let go. And I remember seeing this person in a mall about a year and a half later and having a brief conversation with them, walking away and thinking, and just kind of realizing that my stomach hadn't twisted. And it wasn't that I'd thought, oh, I trust this person now, and now we're going to be good friends. But it was, I didn't feel the same bitterness. And I don't know, I think I want to even be careful, but I think you can forgive somebody and still feel a lot of angst. For me, forgiveness is more about giving up my right to get even, or to seek retribution.
Yeah.
To me, it's not about seeking to make reparation. I think that if somebody wrongs you, there's sometimes things that need to happen that they need to do to repair, but it's my ability to maybe go beyond reparation to, as one of my friends said, I don't get even, I get ahead. It's maybe giving up the right to get ahead.
Something that's really interesting, because you talked about something that somebody did to Rochelle.
Yeah.
And I've had that conversation with myself before, where I think, this person didn't harm me directly. This person harmed someone that I care about. And so then I've had to wrestle through, well, is this mine to forgive? Or is this somebody else's to forgive?
Well, so piggyback a little bit on Melanie, I think that for me, if you wrong me, it is far easier for me to let that go than if you harm my children. My children's like number one. Like you do something to my kids, I really struggle with that one. Like I know I need to, but do something to my wife, struggle with that one. If you do things to me, I kind of can work through that and process it. But to Melanie's point, I think sometimes it is a little bit harder. Well, is this mine even to forgive? And yet I do feel very wronged, and I feel like my child, my spouse has been really wronged, and I kind of want to do. I remember, this particular incident occurred when I was working in news, and the person had, in my opinion, wronged my wife. And I remember that something happened in the business sector that this person worked in that could have been really damaging to them. And I really had to wait. It was a legit news story. And I had to make a decision whether I was going to run with it or not. It was legit, and I decided not to, not because it wasn't a story, but because I knew that if I ran the story, why I was going to run the story. It was, and
because you had the perfect cover, though.
It would have been. And,
I mean, that
for
not
me,
taking it,
and I was still angry. I was still, and for me at that point, I just chose, would this be a legitimate news story? Absolutely, it would. And then I thought, well, maybe I do need to run it because it is legit. It is okay. Not okay, but something that legitimate. But I just knew that if I was running it for me, it would be because I was wanting to come after them more than it was about the news or anything else. And for me, that's one of the things I really wanted to not do when I worked in news, was to make it personal, as opposed to, hey, just trying to. Nobody's unbiased in the news, but as much as you can to pull it out and just make it this is just what's happening. Here's the information. But I think that it's a super hard thing to do. And so I think sometimes, like I said, it's giving up the right to get ahead, as opposed. And for me, that's a little bit of, for me, what forgiveness is, more than maybe even a feeling. Because I know, to this day, if I ran into that person, my blood pressure goes up a little bit. It doesn't twist, like my stomach doesn't twist like it used to, but my blood pressure still goes up a little bit.
No, I think
the Apple Watch knows.
It does.
That's right.
It tells me. It's like
when you tap it and it's going crazy. Yeah,
it's strange rhythm. Whatever that.
Well, I think we all have to probably realize that. I mean, I'm just thinking of, as soon as you said, you do something to my wife, I'm going to be upset. You do something to my kids, I'm really going to be upset. And then if you do something to both.
Yeah.
Plus you're my family.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Then it's like, wow, we've really raised things to a level that everyone has, even if there's a heartfelt, sorry, they're confused. There's all like, okay, everyone's doing their best to try to minimize the fallout. That just doesn't go away easily.
No, I think that takes time. That does take time. It takes work.
So in that right there, hold that thought. Sure. Britt wanted to know then, as we're talking about this, is letting go, or forgiveness a one-time event, or is it ongoing?
No, I think that's an ongoing experience. You may not be faced with this just one time. You may be seeing this person over and over, as Ken mentioned. So, but you're still going to have some of the anxieties that come up with that, the churn of your stomach that come up with those situations. But forgiveness is continuous. You're choosing to, as Ken mentioned, not to get even. And you could, if you forgive in one moment, then you get even in the next. Then was there really forgiveness? You'd argue forgiveness didn't actually take place. So I think that is an ongoing experience. It's in perpetuity. If we look at it from the perspective of biblical teaching, if we ask forgiveness for something and we never do that thing again, but God continued to hold it against us, then is there really forgiveness? So we're choosing not to count that thing against that person anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I do have a question I wanted to ask. So here's my free counseling moment. Okay. So one of the I think the really difficult things is not ruminating on how you've been wronged. Like, where you replay it over and over in your head, and you play it back, and whenever you see the person or you find yourself in an experience like that, and I know that rumination is not a good thing, just kind of recycling over it. On the other hand, as I heard you say earlier, it doesn't mean you forget either. So I'm curious, Kerri, what advice you have for people who have been deeply hurt and they find themselves constantly kind of going back to that hurt and replaying it in their mind. I think we all probably know, I worked with a person who could, every year I had to do this particular event with them, and I knew I was going to hear the same story about 4 people that had wronged them, and I was going to hear it over and over, and they played it back, and I was like, dude, let it go, because it wasn't my hurt, right? But what advice do you give to clients who are having a hard time not ruminating, not kind of replaying? How do you quit doing that when that pain is, and it's one thing when somebody has quit the behavior. It's another thing when it's that they keep doing the behavior. And so it keeps you start playing back, 15 times ago, and now it's 10, and you just keep it, you kind of keep snowballing of that. What do you tell clients about how to?
This is such a good one.
It is.
Right? The invasive, intrusive thoughts. I can't wait to hear this. She's so good at this part. So yes, let's hear it, hun.
Yeah. Rumination is hard to not do, right? Because like you said, the pain is valid. It's real. The wound is real. And so it's hard to not think about how you were harmed and the pain that was caused. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is to acknowledge that pain, right? Because it's not, you don't want to gaslight yourself into like, okay, well, I'm fine. Everything's fine, because it's not, clearly. So think about, first of all, forgiveness is a choice, right? It's a decision and a commitment, right? There needs to be a commitment that comes with that, because otherwise it's, like you're back and forth. Like, I forgive. No, I don't really forgive. I change my mind, So it's a decision and it's a commitment. And with that, you want to think about, okay, so with making this decision and committing to this decision and letting go, what am I letting go? But also, what am I inviting? What am I gaining from this decision of letting go? And that might look like I'm gaining peace, clarity, connection, less anxiety, less angst. Like, there's something to be gained from the forgiveness. And that is the gift that you give to yourself. No one benefits from that but you.
So it's like maybe asking myself the question, what would life look like if I didn't think about this as often? Or what would life look like if I chose to give up my right to get even, or to say what I really want to say that isn't going to be.
How could I benefit from that? Yeah.
But you've also talked about replacing those thoughts also, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so those intrusive thoughts come in. How long we stay on those thoughts could also completely disrupt our whole mental well-being also. So when we notice those intrusive thoughts coming in, to try and get those thoughts out of our heads quickly. Otherwise, we start to tell ourselves stories beyond what the hurt was.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's natural for those thoughts to come. Again, it's real hurt, right? Like, we're going to think about it. So it's natural for those thoughts to come. What we don't want to do is to almost like invite it in and say, hey, come have a seat at the table. Let's hang out, right? So it's like, okay, the thought comes. We acknowledge that thought is there. And okay, I don't want to be thinking about this. It doesn't feel good. So what else can I think about instead? And so you can do thought replacement. Let me think about something else that actually feels good to me and is helpful and productive and useful. So you can shift your thoughts. We do have the power to do that. It's not easy to do. It takes lots of practice and repetition, but it's possible. So there's shifting those thoughts.
Is that something you plan for ahead of time then? Is that like, when I start thinking about this, I'm going to start thinking about that or something else? Or, I mean, so it's kind of something you have to train yourself and think, well, I'm going to, ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful, because then when it does happen, which inevitably you know that it will, right? Like, you know how you're going to navigate that, how you're going to manage that.
So serenity now? I mean, if we... Serenity. It does. So, but what you're talking about, like, it sounds really good. When you said to Ken, well, yeah, I mean, the things that you might gain from that is, I feel better. I've let go of some of that, maybe that hate or those bad feelings, blah, blah. But the commitment part doesn't sound like I'm the one that was wronged. Earlier you talked about, especially when it's justified, where you're like, look, we're not even in disagreement that you did me wrong and I am justified to be mad. And you'll even agree to it. But then why do I have to do so much work? Because it sounds good, the end game, but this whole commitment, and I've got to be thinking about how to rechannel my thought. It sounds like I'm doing a lot of the work, and the other person's like, well, take it or leave it. I don't care. That to me doesn't sound inviting. It doesn't sound enticing, even though I think the end game sounds okay. But I don't know if it sounds good enough to really put in that much work.
Well, I mean, again, if you value your well-being and you want to have more peace and ease and all of those things, again, when you think about what you stand to gain, what the benefit is for you, not for the other person, right? The forgiveness is not for them. It's not letting them off the hook. They don't really benefit. I mean, they can, but it's really, you're the primary beneficiary, choice, yeah. Right?
Well, we live with the scars, right? So emotional and physical pain are pretty similar, right? So if I punch you in the face right now and you have a knot, you're going to put ice on it. You're going to try to go through the healing process so that you can feel better.
Wait, we're not going to have a demonstration, are we?
We're not going to have a demonstration. I like Randy. But
thanks, Sanjay.
But if I am cut, if someone cuts me, I've got to seek medical attention. We've got to get this wound fixed. I've got to get stitches or antibiotics, whatever the case may be, whatever. But I have to do that for myself so that I can be better. Now, the other person gets to walk away scot-free. I mean, they don't have to be a participant in me feeling better. That's why we have to work in ourselves here, because the other person did the hurting. I have to deal with me. I have to deal with the living with this pain, living with this scar. And so therefore I have to put in that much work. Now, how I choose to deal with the other individual is a whole nother matter. But the scars that I need to deal with are mine. Those are mine to bear, because I'm the one that has to live with that.
So it's a form of self-care.
It is, right? Yes.
I've seen the good parts of it, and I'm not, for myself personally, I'm not arguing, but I can also see why people are just like, why would I forgive? This sounds like a lot of work. I'm feeling pretty good that I hate Sanjay for punching me in the face when I didn't do anything to provoke him. And I could just as easily say, if I were you, I'd watch out for that Sanjay. He's got a temper. He popped me in the face. I didn't do anything. And I could maybe just live in that world for just as easy or maybe easier than the work I'm doing to make myself better.
So that goes back to what I said a little bit earlier, right? So there's some folks that are okay living in the anger. Like we were, I don't know if I can bring up a show that we watch, but and I won't say the name of it, but this mom has this tragic loss, and she goes to these group meetings, and she doesn't really care about the healing process of the group. And the other women in this group are pretty mad at her for just kind of disrupting it and kind of belittling their experience. And so she has this conversation with one of the other moms as a sidebar later on. And she says, you know what? I like being this angry. I like being this mad. I want retribution. I want revenge. And you will have some folks that live in that space and want to be in that space. So again, forgiveness is a choice. And so we first have to make the choice to live in that space. What are we going to gain from that? Or by living with that anger, with living with that retribution, what is it detracting or taking away from our lives, right? What is it preventing me from being able to do? And I know, Kerri, I saw your face kind of light up there to say something. So
yeah, I did. I thought of something. So it's to your point, Randy, about the work involved, right? And I see it as you're working either way, right? So either you're working to carry the weight of that anger and all that stuff, or you're working to release yourself of the burden of having to carry that and opening yourself up to invite, something lighter, right?
But what if it doesn't feel that way? Because I think that's the other part, is if you don't feel like you said, those thoughts are going to come, they're going to continue to come. We know that. And what I heard you saying, it brought me to Tammy had a question, said, how can I create a sense of forgiveness, but also along with that, a sense of peace with those who have done atrocious things against myself and others? So if the work and how long that takes, how does someone find the peace or a portion of the peace, or like, ooh, that was really nice. Like I didn't hate on, I didn't even think of that person today. Maybe that's the little glimmer of peace. Like maybe if I keep working at this, right? I think that's the part where you almost have to, when you're in something that sometimes that dark, that you have to feel like there is something that's not going to take me forever to find, and it will come. And I don't know how to help someone feel that, or be able to say it'll get here. And maybe there's tools to help with that. But
yeah, that's tough because, I mean, we want to feel better immediately, right? We want that instant relief of like, oh, finally, you know? And unfortunately, this is not a process that is an overnight instant thing. You know, even when you make the decision, you don't feel instant relief as soon as you say, okay, I've forgiven, right? Like it is a process that does take time. And I want to be careful too, because I know that there's, you know, this saying that time heals all wounds. And I don't believe that to be true, because it just, you know, kind of sends a message that we just need to let time go by, and then that'll do it, you know?
That doesn't work.
It does not work.
Because if you haven't done any of the work, then you know what it's going to be.
Right.
The next time it's like, you remember when you did that to me?
Yeah.
It's going to come up.
Yeah.
Even if you like the person and like some of the drama has gone down, it's going to come back up somewhere.
Yeah. Time is going to pass one way or another, you know?
How we choose to pass that time matters.
Oh, right there.
So what you just said, you know, you run into a person and you have to forgive that person maybe again, or you're reminded of what that person did to you, which means there's a little bit of a separation. But what if there's no separation because that's turned inward? What if the person that you have to figure out how to forgive is the person that you look at in the mirror every single day? What if I, in a fit of rage, attack Randy? Randy now walks with a limp.
Randy's
getting it today.
He's getting hammered on today.
down.
He had it coming.
He's going down.
But now, you know, Randy's my friend, and now Randy walks with a limp, and I have done this. And so now sorry, Randy,
Wow.
I did this.
Randy,
You're in bad shape.
Am I still gonna?
It's okay. That was it.
I mean, I got punched in the face. I can still ride the Harley as long as I can see. But now you're talking about a limp. Do I have enough strength to hold up my bike?
I mean, in my scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and say yes, because I feel like that would be the safest way to go.
Okay. All right. So I still like you now then.
But seriously,
Yeah.
when you have to live not only with yourself, but with the effects of something that you have done that causes someone else harm that maybe is ongoing, like how do you then turn that inward and forgive yourself?
That was popular in the chat too. I just wanted, for those of you that asked that question about how come I can find it easier to forgive others instead of myself, this is for you.
Yeah, so we had talked about this, right? That's the harder. That could be a whole other sermon
we knew
unto
this
itself.
would come up.
Yeah, this is a big one. So I'll let you start off with this one also. See, I'm deferring the tough stuff to the counselor here, right?
That's it.
So, okay. Radical acceptance is what comes to mind. And I say radical because it has to be that radical, because it's not something that naturally comes and is easy. So when I say radical acceptance, I'm talking about this radical acceptance of what took place. This happened.
And I did it.
It's unchangeable. Yeah. I can't go back. I can't erase it. This happened. So it's acceptance of the reality, right? Which helps us to not fall into wishing it never happened, you know, hoping for it to be something different or wanting it to be something different. Like, this is what it is, sort of thing. And just radically accepting that. And what that does, it frees you from the resistance that we get into with, you know, making peace with what took place.
What about our emotions in that case staying in place as a protective measure, where inside we know what's happened, we know what we've done or what's been done to us, and that wall that goes up, or that the piece that won't let us forgive remains there because is that a valid, like we're trying to protect ourselves from getting hurt again? That we're leaving that wall up just in case. Maybe it's not Melanie or Sanjay, but maybe Ken's joining the fun and pounding on Randy next. And I've
really been pondering what I can do to you.
I know. I can see that moving there. So I'm just getting prepared. So am I not letting go of what Sanjay did or what Melanie did, because I have a feeling Ken's next, and if I just keep my guard up, maybe I'm a little bit more protected instead of just opening myself and going, all right, well, third time is the charm. Maybe this time will be different. Is that a legit thing that happens with us?
Very valid. Yeah. I mean, experience is an exceptional teacher. Like, we learn from our experiences, and that informs, how we engage with the world, how we engage with one another. So with that, I think what is important is recognizing through these experiences our own boundaries. What are the boundaries that we need to have for ourselves and with others? And, boundaries are meant to be amended, right? Like, as we're experiencing things with people, right, we're using those experiences to help us decide and inform what our boundaries. Yeah.
I do think that, to what Kerri said a little bit earlier, when you practice radical acceptance, when you're able to see how you've hurt people and find forgiveness for yourself, I do think it really helps you find forgiveness for others too. I think that when you are able to forgive yourself, it opens up a lot more possibilities, because when you look at another person, you think, well, I know how much I've been forgiven. And I tend to think that sometimes, what does Jesus say? The person who's been forgiven much. And so I think that when you've been forgiven a lot and you've accepted that forgiveness, it's a lot easier for you to forgive other people who are doing things to you as well, and to say, well, I'm a flawed person, so why would I expect somebody else not to be flawed and to make some mistakes?
But sometimes don't we walk around kind of behaving like that, though? We have expectations of others that we don't even have of ourselves. And so we may even come to expect that we'll be forgiven, but then turn around and not forgive in the same way. And so I just don't, that's a true struggle. But I think that is a radical acceptance part of it. And that is, interestingly, a conversation that we have quite a bit, because it's friends or even personal struggle with accepting and forgiving self is there, and so there's a need to be able to acknowledge all of those things.
That's a good point, Sanjay. I mean, that is part of Jesus' parable too, right? The guy who's forgiven like $1 billion and he's out strangling the guy for $500, and so. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that not everybody who's forgiven a lot is able to forgive a lot, but I think I often wonder whether that person really recognized what they'd been forgiven. I wonder
what they've gotten.
I wonder if they had really accepted the king's forgiveness, or if they thought the king was going to come back around to collect later, so they better get that $500 while they,
Well, forgiveness is not an opportunity to do the wrong again or to pass on the wrong, right? And I think that's a part of that story. It's that it is a gift. I've been forgiven. This thing is not going to count against me anymore, and I should either pass that on or not try to take advantage of somebody else,
Now that self-forgiveness has sort of entered into the context of this conversation, I want to ask a question that I asked earlier about, is it mine to forgive? If I have harmed someone else, is it mine to forgive myself, or does that belong to them?
Could you say that one more time?
So if I have harmed Randy, again, sorry, Randy.
Now it's the other leg. I just had to buy a trike. Thanks. That's
Randy,
really
I just want you to know you're safe with me.
It's a safe place with
I am so glad I made you a cup of coffee before we started.
The church will be paying for one free session with Kerri so that you can work all the angst out of this.
Oh, man.
Well, so if I harm Randy, and I feel really bad that I harmed Randy, and I maybe ask Randy for forgiveness, it's Randy's to decide if Randy forgives me or not. Is then is it not mine to forgive myself for the thing that I have done to Randy?
So can you forgive yourself before someone else forgives you?
Yes.
Yes.
In unison. Yes.
Yes.
Ooh, man.
Yeah, I have a much better understanding now. So yes, and you may never be forgiven by Randy, but I think there are learning experiences in your forgiveness also. I am not only forgiving myself, but I am not gonna do this thing again. I'm not gonna harm Randy in this way or any other way for that matter. But because you may never have contact with Randy again. Randy may say, I want nothing to do with Melanie ever again. Like, I got walk with a limp. I can't even hold my Harley up properly anymore.
I mean, that's
right?
fair.
I mean, he may never want to speak with you ever again. And he may even choose to never forgive you. But your story is still being written. Your life still needs to be, you still need to live. And so I think, yes, you can forgive yourself for that thing that you've done. I think you can seek forgiveness from God for what you've done and continue to live a rich and fulfilling life, even though Randy may have chosen never to speak with you again or to forgive you in a case like that. And we do need to release that burden also from ourselves.
I think a part of that is recognizing that forgiveness doesn't mean that the consequences are taken away.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so forgiving yourself doesn't mean that you don't still need to make restitution, that you don't need to make amends.
Right.
So, forgiving yourself isn't like, oh, well, I did that and now I forgive myself, so Randy should be forgiving me and I don't need to go ahead and pay for his medical bills because I've forgiven myself and he should be forgiving me. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, when you forgive yourself, it's about, again, giving up the idea that you are a horrible person, that you don't deserve to have other opportunities, but it is also still a recognition that there are consequences and that there are amends that still ought to be made. And I think that when you truly forgive yourself, you recognize the amends that you need to make. I mean, that's a part of any 12-step program is, you have to own that you did it. You're going to have to forgive yourself. But part of it is also making a list of the people that you've wronged and then figuring out how you're going to make amends or giving the opportunity for amends to be made. And so I think a lot of times that's one of the hang-ups to forgiveness is on my side of things. Well, I still owe this person. I can't forgive myself because I really did something that they'll never be the same. And so how can I forgive myself? That's a hang up. And then the other side of it is how can I forgive this person? If I forgive them, then it means that they don't owe me anything, that they don't need to pay to have my car fixed. They don't need to. Well, no, those are two separate things.
Yeah.
And the Bible is very clear about making restitution. Yeah. When you break something or damage something, that there's restitution. But I think the problem is we conflate those things often.
Yeah. I want to say something real quick about the self-forgiveness piece. So I think it's important to separate the person from their actions, including yourself, right? Like there's me as a person and there's the thing that I did. And I think that helps with the self-forgiveness piece of it.
And the thing doesn't define you.
The thing doesn't define you, right?
Not necessarily your identity.
Yeah, right? So like you can be a good person and you did a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm. How do we see that for the other person, though? That's much more difficult.
It is more difficult.
Because we don't know their intentions.
Because that may really be who they are.
Well, and we had like 3 or 4 different people, so I'm not going to name everyone going through here because we had multiple people kind of asking that same thing. Kind of going back to what we first talked about a little bit of, does forgiving someone always mean that you then become close friends? And I think the answer obviously to that is no. But then in a response, it was, that's a great question. I think people presume forgiving someone will automatically change our emotions toward that person, but aren't those two different things? And it really is, right? Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Is that we don't have to become or keep ourselves in that situation to stay close or any contact at all, if that's really it. And I wanted to get to, before we get too much further, Randy said, forgiveness and the intersection of abusive relationships creates complexity we do well to consider in the context of this conversation. I think it's really good to maybe take a moment and how does that apply when someone is we're talking about now just I've got 2 bum legs and a fat lip and I'm had to buy a new Harley.
So sorry.
Versus someone who an abusive relationship, in whatever that looks like, that's a totally different kind of thing that brings out different emotions and does different kind of damage and probably almost assuredly longer lasting damage that's going to probably require someone like Kerri to help someone through. Does the advice change any for that situation than what we've already been talking about? Is that a specialized where it's like maybe we shouldn't be answering that on the podcast? Maybe you should just go see somebody. What do you say?
Those situations are incredibly difficult, and I think safety first, always safety first. I think that God is interested in our well-being. And if we are in relationships where our well-being is suffering, our spirit is being broken down through, recurrent abuse after abuse after abuse, I don't know that that's something that, God wants for us. And we have to look at, how is our well-being being impacted? How is our safety being impacted? And prioritize those things. It doesn't mean that prioritizing those things means that the relationship, can't improve, That may look like having to, enlist the help of a couples counselor. It can look like lots of different things, but I think when someone's well-being and their safety is at risk, that needs to come to the forefront of the conversation.
Is it a good idea to just think about maybe if I'm feeling this way and this is maybe when the realization really you're faced with it, you can't ignore it any longer. This is really the relationship I'm in. Maybe that just to be sure, maybe I should go talk to someone and see what kind of advice they give to make sure that you're not trying to take on something that maybe prolongs where you are or takes you down a path that wouldn't be as helpful.
So I want to be very careful here because it's when it comes to abuse, depending on the dynamics of the abuse, there are issues of control. There are issues of separating the individual from family, from friends, from access to money. And so getting up to just go see a counselor may not be possible. And sometimes leaving is the most dangerous time in a domestic abuse relationship. That is very tricky. It's very individualized. I think separation sometimes is the best way to think as clearly as possible. And so if there's an opportunity to separate and to get the support you need for your well-being, whether it be food, shelter, clothing, and what have you, counseling and all of that, then that's the thing to do. But getting access to the counselor may not be the easiest thing on the front end. I think it goes both whether male or female. It goes both ways. So I think that's one of the important things there. So I think getting some separation there, because there may be issues of codependency there also, and that's a very intricate situation that would need to be worked out, I think, with a counselor. And but I don't know that a lot of that can happen unless you are separated from the source of your turmoil.
When it comes to forgiveness, I'm going to sort of interpolate something I heard the two of you talk about earlier, and that is this process of reflection when it comes to forgiveness. And the tense of the word, I think, is important because you can forgive someone for something that happened that you have reflected on, but I don't know that you have the distance or the space or the reflection to forgive someone for something that is happening. So I don't know that that's even, if it's an ongoing a situation, like forgiveness can't enter into that yet.
It hasn't ended.
Right.
There's nothing. It's continuing to happen to me. And then what would you be forgiven if it is continuing? That person then is continuing to wreak havoc. So they are then not apologetic or wanting to stop. And I know that in situations like that, there are lots of apologies. This will never happen again. And it happens and you kind of get stuck in a cycle. But I agree, when it is happening, enough time hasn't taken place to be forgiven. You tend to ask for forgiveness at the conclusion of the thing that occurred. When it's continuing to happen, I don't know that is a time to let go or to forgive. But there definitely, in my opinion, has to be some separation. If not just for mental health and well-being, just for safety purposes, it has to be some separation.
So Anonymous wants to know, kind of coming off that point, when, if ever, is forgiveness wrong? Can it be wrong? Maybe in the case you just mentioned, like, hey, it's still happening. You can't really forgive something that hasn't stopped yet.
I think when you use forgiveness as a weapon, I've forgiven you.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, ouch. Ouch. I didn't think of that one. Good. Oh, Ken out of left field with the leverage. Throw to home plate. Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
No, that was right on. Another one, too. There's a couple left that I want to get to. And this deals more with, I find anger very confusing. When is it bad and when is it okay? And like having your anger turning into resentment when you, and managing that. So, while can you forgive wholeheartedly as well as God could possibly ask you to do it and still be angry? Is that possible? Or do you have to be to a point where to truly forgive, you've had to get past that anger or that resentment?
So I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial, but
okay.
I think that they can coexist.
Okay.
So you can still be angry about the...
I forgive you, but I'm still mad at you.
Right? The hurt doesn't go away just because I've forgiven you, right?
Okay.
Like I'm still hurt about that. I'm still angry that happened. And I'm also not letting that anger control the decisions that I'm making. It's not consuming me, right? Like, so I think that they can coexist. There's room for both.
But isn't like anger and resentment two different things, though? I don't know that, because I could be angry without resenting.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Can you? I feel like those are
maybe.
I mean,
maybe my brain I can.
Those are wound
really
tight.
intertwined.
They're wound, but I don't know that I don't know that when I'm angry, I am also resentful.
I can't.
Give it a couple minutes. I'll get there.
I'm with Sanjay. I think that there's a difference between anger and resentment.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the helpful things for me when I think about anger is more of a indicator light on the control panel of my life that says, I feel like I've been wronged. Mm-hmm. Something's wrong. When I start feeling angry, it's that, and it's just like any other, like when the engine light comes on your car, it's not good to look at the light and go, yep, something's wrong with my engine. I'm just going to keep driving and I'm going to stew that there's something wrong with my, you want to check out what's going on with the engine and let it be an indicator. And so that's what I would say the difference between healthy anger and bad anger is when you start feeling angry, it's time to explore why. Yeah. What's going on and deal with that. But to just kind of simmer in it is where it starts becoming unhealthy.
And that's where the resentment starts to build.
Exactly. It can lead to resentment. Yeah.
Great
because
question.
Then I think like the resentment and the hatred now starts to be more woundly tight than the anger, in my opinion, at least. That's it kind of simmers and, maybe it was low oil, but now the engine's seizing up because I haven't addressed the underlying anger issue.
Yeah. Great question, Aaron. That got, and then T. Cinco said, Malachi McCourt said, resentment is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. That's wow. That's a good quote. So,
that's a good one.
So maybe the longer you let it fester and go like, how come this person isn't as mad as
it can be debilitating and it can be all consuming. And that we have to be very careful not to kind of devolve into that.
Well, I mean, how many times in your life have you either been surprised to find out that the person you're really upset with had no idea you were upset?
Oh my God.
Or how many times have you been surprised to find that somebody had been angry at you for years
and you
had no idea? You're like, I don't even remember what you're talking about.
That's the most frustrating thing ever.
That is so, you mentioned I had a chance issue years ago, serving in a church, and I guess I'd forgotten to either hug or shake someone's hands, distracted or whatever. And one of our members came up to me and said, "Yeah, I've been mad at you. I just finished preaching a sermon. I've been mad at you for months now. You've refused to shake my hand." And I had no clue whatsoever. And I never, would purposefully refuse to shake someone's hand. But so much time had passed, I couldn't even remember the context in which she was talking about this thing. But it happened in a large group, and I must have missed her, but I had nothing against her. But she had something against me, and I had absolutely no clue that this was going on.
That's tough because you're oblivious.
It kind of goes back to something you said in your sermon about the stories we tell ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a time. It was really interesting today. I was talking about communication with our collegiate Sabbath school group, and there was a couple that walked in late that just as I was talking about communication, how we sometimes don't take the time to really, asking how and what questions instead of accusatory why. And so they walk in and I could see that they seem pretty confident people. And I said, so I could say to them, "Why are you late?" And that's going to make them defensive. Or I could say, "Hey, how's your morning been? How are things going?" Mm-hmm. And what was so funny about it was they started laughing. They said, "We just sat in another Sabbath school for 20 minutes, not knowing that this Sabbath school was there." And then somebody was like, "Hey, I think, collegiate is where you want to be at." And so they were in another Sabbath school.
Wow.
So, and the reason they were late was not because they tried to be late, because I didn't have the right signage up. And so many times we get mad at people, we harbor resentment, and we've actually caused some of it, but because we were not curious, because we didn't approach the person and say, "Hey, I'm kind of wounded that you didn't shake my hand last week. Is it something that I said to you?" And you're like, "I love you. I don't." Yeah. And then just accepting him, Brene Brown's assumption of good intent, saying, "Oh, well, then if that's what you say, then I'll believe you."
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have one final question from Nashville Tim. Forgiving someone who has caused the death of someone close to you is one of the hardest things ever. If a person wishes to forgive but is unable to communicate with the person who harmed them deeply, how do they deal with that?
Unable to communicate with the person that's done the harm.
Unable to communicate with the person that did the harm.
Then it almost becomes forgiveness and absentia. If you're wanting to forgive, but you can't get in contact with that person, then you're making peace with the forgiveness within yourself.
Is that satisfying?
But you may not have, you can't find the person.
Right.
There's no, what if the person has already passed on, or you just, lives in a different, country or whatever, you just can't.
You can't, yeah.
Can I give you an even worse scenario? The person doesn't want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
So that kind of goes back to the personal work that we talked about a little bit earlier, because that's beyond your control now. This is not, you're trying to, I think, for example, if Jennifer was not able to get in contact with Ronald, she reached out to a detective. She did work. And if the detective had come back and said, "Well, he doesn't want to talk to you," then that would have been the end of it, right? So I think that's a very unique situation, but you're choosing to still forgive, but you have zero control over, again, it's for you, not the other person. You just cannot get in contact with that person, but you've done your part. You've kind of gone 50% of the way or 75% of the way. You're just not able to connect with that individual.
I wonder if it's the ritual aspect of forgiveness, the actual act of speaking to someone and forgiving them, or speaking to someone and asking for forgiveness. I've heard of people who, if they don't have the ritual aspect of forgiveness, then they don't know how to forgive. And I wonder if it's the ritual aspect of forgiveness, the actual act of speaking to someone and forgiving them, or speaking to someone and asking for forgiveness. I've heard of people who, if they don't have the ritual aspect of forgiveness, then they don't know how to forgive. And I wonder if it's the ritual aspect of forgiveness, the actual act of speaking to someone and forgiving them, or speaking to someone and asking for forgiveness. when unable to do that ritual act, they may do an alternative act, such as write a letter.
I was just going
to
say
the person.
Yes.
Wow.
That ritual act is really important as an important part of the process of doing that work. And so if you can't have contact with that person, you can write a letter, and that letter allows you to say all the things that you want to be able to say, but you can't say. Like, you're still able to get it out. Yeah.
That just seems like one more, like that almost seems like a pile on, like, well, we have all the rest of this to deal with. We have all the other work to do. And now I have to write a letter. That doesn't seem.
Sometimes that can be cathartic.
I wouldn't say have to. I think back to probably one of the humblest U.S. presidents, Abraham Lincoln, and they found a pile of nasty letters in his desk
yes.
that he had written to people who had wronged him that he never mailed. He just wrote them, got it out, and there is something very, I think, very cathartic about being able to just say what you want to say, but maybe it's not. I mean, and so for me, it goes beyond this. So if you can't contact the person, that's one thing. Sometimes you can contact the person, but saying what you really want to say wouldn't be helpful to the situation overall. So I think there's a lot of value in
being able to do that.
Doing that, and for those of you who don't like writing, I mean, you can make a video. You can tape yourself on video and then watch it back later, and
they have voice memos too.
Exactly.
If you want to hear the angst in your voice.
So there's lots of different ways of doing that.
Okay. Well, we could continue. We've gotten through the questions, and the comments were plentiful of amen and thank you, Sanjay and Kerri. Wonderful message, so essential, on and on and on. So know that your message today was timely for a lot of people who really did resonate not only with the topic, but what you were talking about and the way that you talked about it. So thank you guys for being willing to be a part of it. Stay late. I don't know if anyone else's stomach is grumbling, but mine is, because it's a little bit later in the afternoon. It's lunchtime.
We made it to food.
We need to get some food. Oh, speaking of food, I have one more. My daughter texted me, and she's like, she wants to know, what is your favorite Thai place in Orlando? If you're Thai, do you like Thai?
Thai Tani in Celebration.
Thai. Yes, they have a location in Orlando also.
They do?
Yes, they have two locations.
How do you spell Thai Tani? How do you spell that?
THANI.
Okay. That's important.
Kerri's. I mean, that's her favorite thing.
Thai's my favorite food.
Oh, no, us.
Are they both equal, or is it like sometimes like restaurants, they're one, like Thai Phuket, 2, not 1?
They're both the same, but I don't know why I feel like the menu
different?
Different. They have two locations, but the menu.
What's the second location?
I think it's off International Drive.
Okay, so
the only one is Celebration. Yeah,
because it's closer to us. But there's the Orlando one.
The recommendation though is there in Celebration.
Celebration is one that we typically go to.
Ellie, we're
field trip.
We're taking the Harley for Thai, baby. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for.
We like that location.
Caught that one on the last little bit. Next week,
can I ask one question? There was one question I personally just wanted to ask.
Oh, and Sanjay, you had a question that came in. So let's grab that too. But go ahead, Ken.
So, and I don't know, maybe we can put this in a different place. You can cut and paste if you want. But I'm always curious when I'm asked to guest speak somewhere, or I know I'm doing a one-off, a lot of times the topic will be a little bit personal for me in some way. And I'm wondering if there's anything you're comfortable sharing with us about why this topic, and if there was anything personal about it for you.
Oh, it's always personal. Well, I think I'll say this. 21 years is not without its fair share of forgiveness and letting go. I would say that. So there is a lot of work. I think if there's something that has been kind of keys to this relationship lasting as long as it has been the communication and doing the deep work that is required to keep it going. And I think we kind of mentioned we're pretty open books with most things. Some of this work has included personal therapy, individual therapy. Some of it has been marriage therapy. Whatever was necessary to try to resolve some of those things that may not even have started in the relationship, may have been childhood issues, and those things that manifest themselves in different ways. So It's something that we've learned. We really do practice not letting the sun go down. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the sun sets and everything is resolved. But we sometimes will take the separation. Sometimes we will say, I don't have the words right now. I don't have the words. Let's try this in a couple of hours. But we also know that we're going to do those check-ins to try to resolve that. And so, but it's also something that I think is enveloped in love, and which is a huge theme in our lives, not just the intimate love, but the other manifestations of love and friendship, absolutely. And so forgiveness is a part of that. And it's a huge part of it. And it's something that we've practiced. It's something that is hard. It's not an easy thing. Believe you me, we're not making light of forgiveness. We understand all the complexities. We've lived much of it, the intrapersonal and the interpersonal conflicts that are there. So I would say that probably is what led us, or why we ended up here. It's something that we have found easier and easier to do as time has moved on. And there are some folks who are not necessarily a part of our lives anymore. We have zero resentment, zero hatred, no nothing. We've forgiven, but sometimes people are also for a season. And we've moved on with our lives, and we continue to live as fulfilling a life as we possibly can. So I would say that would be it, if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so initially when you asked us, I thought it was still the series of like connecting across like the different things. So I was like, oh, connecting across conflict, we can do that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I want to hear that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do a follow-up episode.
Yeah, we definitely played back and forth. I mean, when Ken asked us, I remember putting it off because we didn't want to make a decision because Kerri was in the hospital at the time.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, right now, my 100% focus is getting her healthy. That's it. No, nothing. But, check with me in a few weeks and we'll figure it out. And, she's fine now. But that's kind of how we rally. Something happens, let's focus on this thing. Let's deal with this thing first. This is the most important thing for us right now. And so we've kind of, through our relationship, what are we protecting here? And we firmly believe that we are God's examples on earth, and our relationship is a manifestation of that union between God and the church. And we very much ask God for forgiveness, and we expect that forgiveness, and we try to live fruitful lives. And so we see that the marriage as emblematic of that.
Okay. And that was the thing I forgot. I already edited this out in my mind, so I'll just let you know. It was conflict. That was part of what was happening in the chat that I didn't take all of it down because we would have never gotten to all of it, and it was a little more off topic. But like, how do we deal with conflict? Because some people are like, man, my family, that was like sport. Like conflict was like, who can be, who can just be, can win. Yeah, who can win that part of the family dynamic. And I resonated with that. Certain parts of my family growing up, it was just like, who can shout the loudest?
Yeah.
Who will just not close their mouth until they've had the last word? And then if they're not, maybe I have to throw a barb in there just to get you to be shocked for a moment and not say anything, and that way I win. And so I kind of felt like that was a part too, but that would be a whole nother show of how we throw that in there. But Sanjay, you had a question that someone had sent to you. Let's make sure we get that.
Yes. So I was asked if forgiveness then requires that. Oh man, how is it termed? Does taking initiative mean that I have to do something more? And so, really surrounded. I've forgiven. I've done my part. Do I now need to go and be friends and make amends? And we've already kind of answered that part of it. And really and truly, again, sometimes people are for a season. And if the work of forgiveness has already been there, then that may be where we leave it at that point. There may be no other step that needs to be taken to address the situation.
But also, if the person that you have forgiven is open to a dialogue and you're open to it and you feel safe enough. I mean, there's people in my life that I never thought would still be in my life that are.
Right. And so we discussed that part of it also. It all depends on that person's willingness. And does that person want a relationship with you? And if they don't, and that's okay. If they do, then there may be further initiative in saying, okay, well, maybe the relationship won't look the same as it did before. Maybe it'll look a little bit different, but you can still continue to have a relationship.
Well, I hope everyone else that's listening had learned as much and just and kind of worked through the thought processes, and the questions were great. You guys were just on point today. And so I don't know, I'm like, maybe we need to start. I don't want to think about it. We should start recording on Saturday. When we put you guys under the gun, you always come up with with questions. And of course, the topic I was sort of expecting that this would be the result of that. So guys, thank you again. We know it's a big ask to do 2 sermons. You don't just have to do it once. You have to do it twice.
Then a podcast afterwards.
Then a podcast afterwards. And so thank you both for what you brought to this, and everyone thoroughly enjoyed it. And so thank you. Thank you. So that means next week we are at the I'm gonna take a minute. We're at the end of my favorite for the year.
Yeah.
And who's our last person?
Christina Anderson.
That's right, Christina.
Next week.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, she's going to talk about embracing your story.
Embracing your story. Is she? So it's just her.
It's just her.
No, she's not bringing Bernie.
I mean, I don't know if she's bringing guests with her. As far as I know, it is just her.
Well, that is going to be the final one, and then what are we headed to after that?
Well, then Ken has
The
to.
family that plays
that's
together.
right.
Preach
Yeah.
again.
You said that in today's message as we wrapped up, and I forgot about it.
Yeah, and the series after that is Get to Work. I feel like those should have been flipped. I feel like,
No, we're playing. Now we're going to get
doing
to
a
work.
play.
Hard.
Okay, and now we're done playing. Now we're going to work. So
No.
it feels like,
Yeah.
okay, we work first
We
and
eat
then we
gelato
play.
before broccoli.
Don't forget,
We eat gelato
play
before
and then we
broccoli.
work.
Yeah, no, my grandpa always told
Dessert
me,
first.
he's like, if you don't eat dessert first, he's like, what happens if you have a heart attack and you didn't
Exactly.
get your dessert?
I mean,
Exactly.
I
He's like,
guess.
is that
Don't
even?
let our boys hear that.
Did you even live if you didn't get dessert? Come on. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great week.